it's Messi! It is the cleanest of clean finishes from the best on the planet.
It's time for the biggest sports stories.
Liverpool, the champions of Europe, are top of the world.
The biggest interviews.
That such a great spectacle is ruined by such thuggish behavior.
And all the analysis right here.
He's the one player that has the arrogance to think that he can play in any stadium in the world and any pitch in the world in front of any player in the world and take them on.
Every weekday, it's my sport, it's your sport. It's ZiFM Sport. Let's join the team for the biggest show in the world of sport on ZiFM Stereo. My station, your station.
Hello, welcome to it. This is ZiFM Sport on a Monday, Manic Monday, the lockdown edition. From our home to the comfort of your homes, you'll hear from Barry Menandi, Mike Madoda, Mark Paz, Chris and Alois Bunjira. My name is Sean Tafirenyika. I'm the producer for ZiFM Sport. I hope you're staying at home and being safe. Jam-packed show as always on a Monday. We've got the Castle World Football Report. And around the world in 60, we've also got a local sports news roundup plus our power play on a Manic Monday. And now tonight we're going to be discussing the news from FIFA. Now recently, the global football governing body said they will release operational funding in the coming days as a first step of a relief plan to assist football communities impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now this measure will mean that a total of 115 million US dollars will be distributed to among 211 national football governing bodies around the world. ZIFA will receive about 500,000 US dollars, and we understand that this figure can also go up. Now the Z team will discuss the various ways this money can be used towards COVID-19 impact alleviation. But I want to get your thoughts on this. How should ZIFA use this money? Now curiously, can we also trust that they'll do the right thing with the money anyway? The handle is at ZiFM Sport on Facebook and Twitter. While you take a moment to think, let's go to the home front for a local sports news roundup with Pause.
The Home Front. Local sports news and analysis.
Let's get into our local sports roundup on this Monday evening. We'll start with golf, where leading Zimbabwean amateur golfer Kieran Vincent capped off a memorable comeback season for the Liberty University men's golf team after being named among the best collegiate golfers in the US by the Golf Coaches Association of America. The 22-year-old rising star made his return to competitive golf at the start of the season after missing the entire 2017-18 season and some part of the 19 season due to injury problems. Vincent enjoyed a remarkable return to the course, finishing the season, which was cut short due to the coronavirus outbreak, in style by being named the GCAA All-America Honorable Mention team for the first time in his fledgling career. Well done, Kieran Vincent. Only upwards for you. To karate, and the Zimbabwe Karate Union could face disciplinary action from the World Karate Federation for continuing to operate in breach of the global governing body's statutes. The WKF revised its statutes in 2018 and prohibited affiliates from mixing semi-contact and full-contact karate. However, ZKU continues to administer both semi- and full-contact karate in breach of WKF rules. The WKF expects affiliates to practice only semi-contact karate. Some sports medicine news, and sports scientist Kanile Dlamini has warned coaches against taking a collective approach to dealing with athletes' fitness post the COVID-19 crisis. Sports personalities have been forced to come up with inventive ways of keeping fit during the lockdown, which is entering its fifth week today. Most sports persons were given training programs by their coaches and fitness trainers to follow during the lockdown. Dlamini, the Bulawayo Province football referee's physical coach, said it is important for athletes to follow their programs to avoid injuries when they get back to action. That is your local sports roundup.
Hi, I'm Warriors coach Zdravko Logarušić, and you are listening to ZiFM Sport.
Sports with a difference.
So here's the thing. The Zimbabwe Football Association, ZIFA, is set for financial boost after FIFA revealed it was releasing operational funds for 2019 and 2020 amounting to $115 million to member nations. Now, the funds are the first step of a relief plan to help alleviate the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, ZIFA, along with FIFA's 210 member associations, will receive about $500,000 each in the next coming days, as well as the remaining entitlements of their 2019-2020 stipends. Now, for more on this, let's turn to a conversation Mike had with Barry.
One of the key debates and discussions that's been happening in the world of football is the financial impact of the COVID pandemic on the game that we love so much. And there's been so much information and so much talk about how it will affect the game in the major leagues of Europe, because information is awash and information is readily available. But here at home, there's been very little talk, very little discussion, and a very few articles or sports stories have been spoken about in our electronic media regards the pandemic and how it's going to affect our local game. Umudlalo wetu, mutambo wedu wenavo. And so today we get to speak to renowned football pundit and a member of our ZiFM sports team, Barry Menandi, who's also the chairman of Golden Eagles Football Club, a club that's been making shockwaves in the lower regions of Zimbabwe football. And so it's a club to watch, and Barry Menandi certainly an administrator worth hearing from. But here are some of the details if you didn't know. FIFA on Friday announcing that they will release all operational funding due to member associations for the years 2019 and 2020 in the coming days as the first step of a relief plan to assist the football community impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. This measure will mean that a total of around $150 million will be distributed among the 211 national football governing bodies around the world, ZIFA amongst them. They are quoted as saying, and this is FIFA President Gianni Infantino, the pandemic has caused unprecedented challenges for the entire football community, and as the world governing body, it is FIFA's duty to be there and support the ones that are facing acute needs. This starts by providing immediate financial assistance to our member associations, many of which are experiencing severe financial distress. And Barry, no doubt that Zimbabwe football is facing severe financial distress.
It certainly is, and I love the way you started it by saying that we haven't talked about the financial impact of COVID-19 on the sport that we love. And the reason for that is that we haven't realized that football primarily is business. Sport is business. And anything that happens in business is going to affect the business of football. Right now, business isn't operating. Football can't operate without football. We're not playing. So it's a massive challenge at the moment, and I'm glad you've drilled it down to the financial needs. And ZIFA is going to get much needed support. The hope is that ZIFA is going to do the right thing with those funds and make sure that they trickle down to the clubs.
Is part of the reason why there's very little in the way of discussion on the financial impact, Barry, because very few people have actually assessed and made a study on what the impact is likely to be and quantified what the damage is?
That's exactly it. I think the first thing that needed to be done, obviously now we're speaking in hindsight, but the first thing was to quantify what the football economy actually is. And we haven't done that exercise, at least not to my knowledge. And knowing what the football economy is would then result in us knowing what the silos of revenue, silos of expenditure, silos where money is coming in and going out actually are. Perhaps the administrators wanted to remain opaque because perhaps there is some leakage going on. But let's not speculate on that. Let's just say that the study hasn't been done. So therefore we cannot say that football has lost $1 billion. Football has lost $10 because we don't know what football has lost. At the moment, I read a ridiculous statement on one of the sites by a journalist talking about the fact that Zimbabwean clubs cannot be talking about cutting salaries for players simply because the players are being paid too lowly. Well, you're not talking about the revenue element. Where are the clubs earning the money? Many of them are relying on sponsor funding.
Yeah.
Sponsor funding will be affected when the economy kicks in again, because the economy is not just going to snap its fingers and go back to where it was. We are all going to feel the effects of COVID-19. Now, if sponsors are feeling that, likelihood there may be cuts in terms of the expenditure upon sponsorship and all sorts. That affects the clubs and ultimately affects the players.
Well, let's just briefly touch on that factor that you brought in about the fact that players in Zimbabwe football are paid lowly. Is that a function of the fact that Zimbabwean clubs are also earning rather lowly?
Correct. And it's simple. Simple business is money in, money out. Let's not use financial terms. Money in, money out. The money that's coming in is going to determine the money you're going to pay out. And right now, clubs are not earning well. Clubs don't even have a diversified range of revenue. If you look at their revenue lines, it's probably sponsorship and that's it. Oh no, I kidded. Sponsorship, gate takings, and that's it. So there's no TV money to speak of. Yeah. There's no merchandising to speak of. So the financial model in itself is thin. As a result, the downstream effect is that the employees of that particular business are going to be paid lowly because the revenues are low. So it's simple maths.
It's simple maths, really. And of course, there is no doubting that the impact on Zimbabwe football is high. Barry Manandi mentioning the fact that a lot of the revenue that our football clubs earn in Zimbabwe, even in our Castle Lager Premier Soccer League, which is the top flight, is out of sponsorship. Those teams that are sponsored by the corporate entities that own them. For example, FC Platinum, who are owned, of course, by Mimosa, Ngezi Platinum Stars, who are owned by Zimplats, and other models that you find of a similar nature in Zimbabwe football. If those businesses are not performing and have been affected during this pandemic, no doubt it's going to have an effect on the football club. And then the rest, of course, that are self-funded and are community-based teams relying largely on gate takings. If there's no football being played, it means that there are no gate takings to be had, and it means that there is no money coming in. So, Barry, we've established that most teams, to be honest, their funding model is based primarily on them receiving from someone. Yes. Okay? And so in this case, no doubt that clubs will be looking forward to receiving something from FIFA.
From FIFA. And the conduit for FIFA in Zimbabwe is, of course, the FA, which is ZIFA. Now, before we even get to the money itself, I think that there needs to be a clarity from ZIFA on their role in football. And in my mind, ZIFA has three roles. Firstly, to act as facilitator, to act as a platform, and then thirdly, to act as a regulator. What are we talking about when we talk about facilitator? Well, it's different things to different people. To an intermediary or a football agent, being a facilitator is access to markets. So ZIFA has got to assist to access markets where they can move players, shift players, etc., etc. To a football club, facilitation is ensuring that the business of football is able to sustainably carry on. COVID-19 aside, in a normal instance, business should be able to and ZIFA should be assisting clubs to run their business models effectively. The second point, which is platform, let's take a football player, just as an example. A football player wants a platform upon which they can play and can be seen so that they can better their lives. How do they better their lives? Going into better leagues and so on and so forth. And then finally, the one that they focus on daily, regulation. Regulation is all ZIFA has been doing. So you'll find that they will institute club licensing like they are rabid. They will talk about the laws and rules of the game and what clubs should be doing and all sorts. But you haven't fulfilled all of your other mandates, and there are many more. But let's just talk about those three. So coming back now to your question around these funds, those three elements then are fulfilled by elements such as this, where FIFA is now giving money. FIFA is giving money for COVID relief, because FIFA knows that clubs are being affected and the football community, the industry of football, is being affected by COVID-19. There's no football going on, meaning that we are realistically affected. I'm glad you talked about match day revenue. It's not happening because there are no match days. So clubs aren't earning at the level that they used to. I believe that the 500,000, and that's what FIFA has said it will drill down to as a minimum for each member association. That $500,000 US needs to be divvied up at least down to the level of Division 1 in Zimbabwe, the 4 regions, and of course the Castle Lager Premier Soccer League. Give clubs a stipend, something that can tide them over. And if given in US dollars, there's an opportunity there in terms of the exchange rate. Right now the official rate stands about 25, 26. immediately you can at least cover salaries, you can cover, because let's say, for instance, a club employs a lot more than just players. They have ground staff, some of them. They have the bus driver, they have kit manager, and so on.
Which they should, to be honest, if they're professional or semi-professional football clubs.
Fair point. Those people need to live, and those families need to exist. So the minute that you have that stipend in US dollars or even in Zim dollars, you are then able to cover, even if you cover a month's salary, it changes everything. It means that someone stays in a job for at least a month longer and they can see out. We don't know how long this is going to last, okay? It may last short, it may last long, but we all need to see the next day. And this will assist clubs to see the next day.
See the next day. That is what Zimbabwean clubs are looking forward to. But will they? And I think the big question is how ZIFA is going to deploy these funds. When we return in the second part of our interview, we'll be getting into the specifics of what this money can be used for at ZIFA level, which of course are the regulators, as Barry Menandi has so eloquently pointed out, but also at the club levels as well, as what can the clubs do with the money to make sure that FIFA gets bang for their buck.
Z. Around the world in 60 seconds. International sports news.
We took off in Wellington, where New Zealand Rugby have formed a committee with the country's 5 Super Rugby teams to review operating models and plot a way forward for the domestic game amid a shutdown in global sport brought about by the coronavirus. Super Rugby, which also includes teams from Australia, South Africa, Japan and Argentina, was suspended in March after 7 rounds of the season when the travel curbs and border controls aimed at controlling the spread of COVID-19 made it untenable. As in other rugby nations, the shutdown has idled hundreds of players and staff in New Zealand and placed pressure on the finances of New Zealand Rugby and provincial unions. We head over to Vienna, where world number 3 Dominic Thiem has rejected the notion that top tennis players should chip in to help lower-ranked competitors. The world's top-ranked player Novak Djokovic last week urged fellow pros to contribute to a fund set up by the sport's major governing bodies. The fund will help players most affected financially by a shutdown, which began in March and will continue at least until mid-May due to the coronavirus pandemic. But Austrian Thiem said he felt that there were sections of society that needed more urgent help during the economic crisis caused by the pandemic than his fellow competitors. We touched down in London, where England's Jofra Archer said on Sunday he'd finally found his Cricket World Cup winners medal after going mad looking for the prized possession following a house move. The 25-year-old Sussex fast bowler published a photograph of the medal on a bed with the caption, "Randomly searching the guest bedroom and boom." Archer, when previously asked about the whereabouts of the medal, told BBC Radio on Saturday, "I had it hanging off a portrait someone did for me and sent to me. I had my medal hanging on that."
Hi, I'm Clemens Matau, chicken in midfielder. You're listening to ZiFM Sports.
Welcome back to a conversation with Barry Menandi, football pundit and football administrator, as we discuss FIFA's COVID-19 relief plan, which they have announced, or at least announced last week on Friday, and which is due to every member association of the global football governing body. Now, just to give you more detail and more facts about the amounts that they talked about, they've talked about 500,000 that's going to each member association, and this is specifically for COVID-19 relief. But apart from that, they've also talked about releasing all other funding for 2019 and 2020 that was due to member associations, ZIFA included. And these are funds of an administrative nature that ZIFA uses month on month, week on week in their normal daily operations. So that money is different from the $500,000 that they're receiving for COVID, isn't it, Barry?
It is. It's very different to those funds, because you'll recall that ZIFA gets backing every year.
Yeah.
Let's not color outside of the lines. That goes without saying. So what FIFA has said is that apart from the support that we give you regularly, we are now going to give you an extra amount, of which the minimum is 500,000. And I think it needs to be stressed, it's very important, that the minimum is 500,000, meaning that ZIFA can apply for more if the COVID impact is heavy upon Zimbabwe football. So on top of what we normally give you, we're giving you 500,000 as a minimum to say, here, assist the football industry to carry on and see another day to be able to see this successfully. So that's essentially the breakdown of these funds.
FIFA is actually saying that this immediate financial assistance should be used to mitigate the financial impact of COVID-19 on football in member associations, namely to meet financial or operational obligations that they may have towards staff and other third parties. The standard obligations and responsibilities in relation to the use of these funds as outlined in the Forward 2.0 regulations remain fully applicable and will be subject to the standard audit and reporting process. And so, very interesting here, Barry, that when it comes to the mitigation, FIFA has now played its part to the member associations. So, ZIFA cannot turn around and say to FIFA, you know what, when we were in the dumps, you didn't take care of us. And so I think also now, football in Zimbabwe is looking at ZIFA and saying, you know what, we are in the dumps. What are you going to do for us? So let's take a look, Barry. You talked, of course, in a very broad brush when you talked about ZIFA's obligation to the Premier Soccer League, to Division 1, to Division 2, and so forth. But how would this $500,000 be effective in our economy here in Zimbabwe in football?
Okay, it's quite simple, because what you want to do is you don't want to prescribe in minute detail to the clubs what they ought to use the funds for, but obviously FIFA has already given an insight there, and it's largely around salaries, which is usually is one of your biggest costs. Staff expenses are usually your biggest cost in any organization, more so in a footballing organization.
Absolutely. So, just to let listeners know, even if you do a study of the major leagues in Europe, usually the wage bill is actually accounting for anything between 45 to 60% of all revenue. Whether it's Portsmouth, Southampton, Liverpool or Barcelona.
100%. And you can see that. And to put a sort of parallel to that, in normal business, you're looking for the sweet spot of staff expenses, that includes allowances and benefits and everything, accounting for about 18 to 23% of your revenue. So you can see that in football, it's massive.
It's a lot higher.
It's a lot higher.
2-3
times. So in essence, that's what FIFA has directed to say, let's keep people in jobs, let's keep families fed. That's really what FIFA is saying without coming out and saying it. So how does it happen in Zimbabwe if, let's say, we got the chance to assist in this regard? Well, an equal dividend is quite easy to do. It's not TV money, it's not anything, just an equal dividend.
What do you mean by that? So you say
to the
how many teams do we have in the top tier?
18. So you say
Division 1?
180,000 we're going to dedicate to the Premier Soccer League, $10,000 US dollars for each team. In Division 1 we've got about 64 teams, give or take. Eastern region I know is down to about 16 teams, 14 teams thereabouts. But let's just use the figure of 64. Let's say $2,000 for each of those, each of the teams in Division 1. You're coming up to about 350 grand. Allocate about 50,000 for the academies, okay? Because the academies have staff as well, technical staff and all sorts. And give them cold hard funds, USD, okay? Or the
just as you received from FIFA.
Just as you received from FIFA. Or give them the Zim dollar equivalent, whatever the case may be. Give them money.
Mutuli has come out and said that the US dollar
can be freely tradable.
Can be freely tradable, so give them in cold hard cash.
Cold hard cash. Give them in their Nostra accounts, etc., etc. Give them the money as it is. And then prescribe a formula, okay? That we expect these funds to be used in this fashion. 50% is to be used for staff expenses, 10% administrative, blah, 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 blah.
And that meets the regulations from FIFA, the way they talk about the funds being subject to the standard audit and reporting process, because you then be able to at least tell FIFA that this is what we use the money for.
That's exactly why I'm saying that there ought to be that formula for clubs, so that clubs can report back and say that this is how we've allocated the funds and this is how we've used them. ZIFA then can have clean books in front of the world governing body, in front of FIFA, to say this is how we use the funds. Now, that doesn't account for 500,000 in total. Because we're not discounting the fact that ZIFA itself has staff, has administrative
as
costs,
an organization.
So it needs some of those funds in itself. Felton Kamambo must be paid for the job he's doing as president. So that then the remainder of that goes directly to the Football Association. And then the task of quantifying what it costs to run football in Zimbabwe. The task of quantifying what it costs a football club to run football in Zimbabwe must now start, so that ZIFA can go back to FIFA and say, you know what, 500,000 wasn't actually enough.
We needed more.
The effect was a lot greater, and we need more. And then the conversation starts, and we begin to see football being treated like an industry and not a pastime.
Absolutely. And Barry, in that regard, I think many people will be perhaps asking the question that, is the instruction from FIFA, does it give power to the football clubs and the football structures to earn this money, or it's a bit vague in such a manner that perhaps ZIFA will say, well, the money is for us as an organization? Do you see the clubs and the divisions, for example, and the Premier Soccer League having enough power to be able to leverage?
I don't see the power, and that's a consequence of two things. And the first one is obviously the discretionary level of responsibility that's been given to ZIFA, to the member associations. That's the first point. The second point is the one we mentioned earlier, which is the opaque nature with which funding towards ZIFA has been handled. So those two elements make it so that the clubs are disempowered to chase that up. Now, the Golden Eagles may or may not be a beneficiary of this, likely may not be a beneficiary of this.
But it should.
But it should in any instance. But the fact that there is that opaque element, there is the discretionary level given to ZIFA, Golden Eagles as a club, Division 1, Division 2, Premier Soccer League have no power whatsoever to hold ZIFA.
So you're saying that ZIFA could say, out of the 500,000 for COVID-19 relief, we are keeping 400,000.
Correct. They can. And then go on and proceed to give some PPE donation to the government and so on and so forth, just so that they manage to clean up their books.
Donate a few football balls and a few footballs, and that's it.
And that's it. So it's a real struggle. And while we're on the subject of PPE, it should be noted that one of the cost centers that's coming up for football clubs that wasn't there before is personal protective equipment.
Yes.
For technical staff, they're going to need thermometers. Previously, in any medical scenario of a football club, a thermometer was not part of the record.
And even the test kits as well.
Exactly.
Because I think it's important, because in the conversation around football resuming in Europe, one of the things they're talking about that they're going to have to test every individual that's going to be involved in the games.
Correct.
Not just the players, not just the technical staff, but also the support staff as well. Everyone will need to be tested.
TV crew, everybody. So testing becomes another element. The clubs, it's going to be a cost on the club. So it wasn't there before C19. So all of these new realities must be managed, and ZIFA as a facilitator, as a platform, as a regulator, it behoves them, it is their responsibility to ensure that clubs can navigate this very difficult and novel territory successfully.
And in terms of accountability, Barry, does this put a bit of pressure on Kirsty Coventry as Minister of Sport as well, just to make sure that she's keeping an eye on how this all plays out in terms of how ZIFA deals with the funds from FIFA, as well as the Sports and Recreation Commission?
Government in general has been under immense pressure, and it's no different for the Minister of Sport. There's a massive responsibility on her, because her not the entire ministry, but certainly that aspect of sport is it's an existential threat to sport. And to try and navigate these waters, we need a captain who's going to be at the wheel. And right now, it's Honourable Kirsty Coventry, so she's got a big job on her hands.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Barry. It's been great, as usual.
Awesome to have this conversation. And hopefully these conversations will begin to be had a lot more, so that we turn our heads away from recreation and pastimes towards business.
Absolutely. And of course, when we start viewing sport as a business, we'll start planning better for it. We haven't heard so much about the planning post COVID-19 in Zimbabwe, and I think we need to start having those conversations about how and what sport will look like after this pandemic has passed away. This is Mike Madoda for ZiFM Sport, and of course you'll be able to continue this conversation with us on social media, on Twitter and Facebook, where you can follow and interact with @ZiFM Sport.
Z
Insightful conversation from Barry and Mike on those funds coming from FIFA, which you needed to know about. And it's also important to get an understanding of how these funds can be used. In order to keep football alive, ZIFA has that task of quantifying the cost of running football in Zimbabwe, and the key suggestion of equal distribution of funds depending on our various leagues. So ZIFA giving cold hard cash to our football clubs so that they can remain afloat. I think this is practical and this is very tangible. So we can only hope that ZIFA will do right by our football clubs. Now keep your messages coming in. I want to get your thoughts. The handle is at ZiFM Sport on Facebook and Twitter. Remember, we've got our Castle World Football Report. But before that, it's our Power Play on a Monday, Manic Monday.
Hi, this is Mike Madura, and you can catch me and the team for all the latest breaking news out of the world of sport, local as well as international, on your favorite station, my station, your station, ZiFM. We are Z-Team on ZiFM Sport.
Z.
You're tuning into ZiFM Stereo, my station, your station. This is a lockdown edition of ZiFM Sport. Let's now switch gears to our main feature on the Monday, the Castle World Football Report.
Alcohol may be hazardous to health if consumed to excess. The operation of machinery or driving after the consumption of alcohol is not advisable. Not for sale to persons under the age of 18 years.
Castle Lager is more than just beer. It's pure liquid gold, crafted from the finest local ingredients to deliver a taste that is somewhat dry, somewhat bitter, but never sweet. It's the taste that stood the test of time. It all comes together with a castle.
The Castle Lager Premier Soccer League Report on ZiFM Sport. The beating drum. The roaring fans. Take a ride on the wild side with the Africa Report on ZiFM Sport.
Former Kaizer Chiefs midfielder Simpiwe Shabalala's agent has dismissed reports that his client will return to Kaizer Chiefs for the new season. The 35-year-old former Bafana star has been without a club since leaving BP Zumaraspor last July. He was reportedly set to move to China, but those plans fell through as a result of the spread of the coronavirus. Yeah, with all sporting activities suspended, Shabalala will have to be patient in his club searching, with Jasmine Mashangane, his agent, ruling out a return to the Amakosi. Mashangane said, "We know we haven't spoken to them. Even before the COVID-19 lockdown, there was no communication from Kaizer Chiefs. There's no way that talks could start now. Whatever that rumor is about Simpiwe Shabalala are unfounded and not true." At the end of the day, one of the things that becomes very difficult to comment on is that if someone from inside Kaizer Chiefs had internal discussions and someone is trying to be clever and let it out, it just hasn't reached me or Shaba at the moment. Remember, Shaba is the nickname that is given to Simpiwe Shabalala. If there's talk within the club about Shaba, it has not reached us. From where I am sitting, I have not spoken to anyone at Kaizer Chiefs. These are the words of Jasmine Mashangane, who represents Simpiwe Shabalala. Yeah, at this moment in time, whenever a star player is out of contract, there's always rumor running around. Simpiwe Shabalala, a big star in South Africa. Obviously, the Amakosi fans would love to have him back at Amakosi. So I'm not surprised that Kaizer Chiefs are starting the ripples. They are starting the rumor so that they can actually give the idea to Shaba, and his agent, that they can start thinking about going back to Kaizer Chiefs. I think they're just ringing them up, saying that, you are Simpiwe Shabalala, you came from Kaizer Chiefs, so you need to come back to Kaizer Chiefs. I think that's all there is to it about, when they start steering that rumor. So I think Jasmine Mashangane is very right. They might not have heard about it, but internally they might be talking about it at Kaizer Chiefs. I'm not surprised. He's a big star. Amakosi fans, they love Simpiwe Shabalala and they would love to have him back at the Amakosi. But looking at the at the side of Siphiwe Tshabalala as well. I don't see him moving abroad. At 35, moving to China, is going to be very difficult, with this coronavirus. Foreign clubs are going to be very skeptical about signing foreign players, and, with their budget and the coronavirus and the skepticism about the whole issue, they might just find it difficult. It has to be really, really a big star that they are signing, So I don't see Siphiwe Tshabalala fitting that bill. The most likely destination for Siphiwe Tshabalala is going to be South Africa. Now here comes the tricky part, the word loyalty. There is this thing called loyalty. Loyalty plays a big part in somebody's life, even in life after football. So he is 35. When I look at him, I think he really needs to look at that thing called loyalty. Amakosi, the biggest club in South Africa, obviously with the biggest fan base in South Africa, their fans would love to have him back. So if he goes to South Africa and doesn't join Kaizer Chiefs, it's going to be looked down upon by the Kaizer Chiefs fans as lack of loyalty. I don't look at it as what can I say? They look at it as betrayal. They will look at it as betrayal. He would have betrayed them. So when you want to do business with people that think that you betrayed them before, they won't accept you very well. I'm talking about life after football. When he is into business, I know Siphiwe Tshabalala is into business. So working with Kaizer Chiefs, them fans, they might take it personally. A lot of them, that is football. I've experienced this. I know exactly what I'm talking about. They might look at it as betrayal. So when you start wanting to do business with them outside of football, they will look back and say you betrayed us. A lot of fans, they take football too seriously and they take it very personally. So I think that it's a good idea for him to go to Kaizer Chiefs. Even if when he is interacting with Orlando Pirates fans, they will still see him as a very loyal person with integrity if he goes to Kaizer Chiefs. Let's say he goes to SuperSport. Everybody, the Kaizer Chiefs fans, the Orlando Pirates fans, the Sundowns fans, they will look at him and say, he was not loyal to Kaizer Chiefs. There is something that is taken away from the person who is not loyal. So for me, I actually think that it destabilizes everything. I'll give you an example of Paul Ince in England. When you look back at him, where does he belong? Does he belong to Manchester United? Do the Manchester United fans take him back as their own? Or Liverpool, do they take him as their own? And some Liverpool fans will say, no, he is a Manchester United fan. Those kind of things. But at the end of the day, when you look back, imagine if he had gone to Italy and come back to Manchester United, they will regard him as their own, and the love that they have for him would be that deep. So I'm going back to the Siphiwe Tshabalala issue as well, that if he doesn't go back to Kaizer Chiefs, life after football might be tricky for him when he gets into business, because these fans, they actually take these things very seriously. But anyway, Kaizer Chiefs is actually a big team. It's a very good destination for him, going back, trotting onto the FNB turf, with all those fans, Kaizer Chiefs fans. I think it can be overwhelming and exciting for him. It's a very good prospect for Siphiwe Tshabalala. If I was Siphiwe, I would definitely go back to Kaizer Chiefs. I hope that his agent, Jasmine Mahlangane, doesn't say things that can antagonize him and Kaizer Chiefs, so that they can scoop at the possibility of him going back to Kaizer Chiefs. They really need to be very careful in what they say. But like I say, I hope that they actually do it properly and he goes back to Kaizer Chiefs and actually finish off at Kaizer Chiefs, and he can actually be assured of a very, very big testimonial if he does that at Kaizer Chiefs.
The Nerazzurri, the Black and Blues, Inter Milan.
It's Romelu Lukaku, and it was never in doubt. He's a beast at the best of times, but this season he has become a monster.
The Giallorossi, the Yellow and Reds, AS Roma.
Belotti has a go! Tremendous hits! That's what he's capable of!
La Viola, the Purple Ones, Fiorentina.
Franck Ribéry seals a glorious win for Fiorentina with a sumptuous goal at San Siro.
The Bianconeri, the Black and Whites, Juventus.
Ronaldo seals yet another 3 points for Juventus.
Tough yet colourful, the best of Italian football on Z.
News out of Italy is that Lazio President Claudio Lotito would be in favour of a playoff with Juventus to decide the Serie A title. Juve were a point ahead of Lazio at the top of the table when Italy's football season was suspended in March due to the coronavirus pandemic. Stringent lockdown measures in Italy have started being eased starting today, and there are plans in place to allow teams to return to training on the 18th of May. A decision has not yet been made on how the 2019-2020 Serie A season will be resumed, with Juve and Lazio still having 12 matches to play, including a meeting at the Allianz Stadium that was initially scheduled for April the 26th. Now, if you remember Lazio, who are the club from the capital based in Rome, they won the first league meeting 3-1 back in December, and they then defeated Juventus in the Supercoppa Italiana 3 weeks later by the same scoreline. So in the two matches that they've played, Lazio have been convincing winners in each of the games. So no doubt that their president Claudio Lotito would favour a playoff because he reckons that his team has got the measure of the champions. But the latest indications coming out of Italy are a lot more positive than being restricted to a playoff at the top of the table. Training will be allowed to resume on the 5th. That's one-on-one personalised training, where players can go back to the training ground but train in an isolated regime. That will be taking place from the 5th. And then on the 18th of May, they've been allowed to return to full training. This has come, of course, with the blessing of the Italian Prime Minister. So all indications in Italy are that football will resume. Once the teams get back to training, I suspect around about perhaps the 9th of June, thereabouts, the weekend around about that time, that's when teams will get back into action, and I suspect that they will wrap up the Serie A season, and it'll be an interesting title race between Lazio and Juventus. So not surprised that Lazio are in favour of a playoff meeting. That's merely, I think, the confidence that Lotito has in his team and the ability to get one over Juventus. But the reality of the situation is that once they announced yesterday that training had been sanctioned and that full training would return on the 18th of May, I think it became a clear indicator that the season in Italy will not be declared null and void, that season will be allowed to play itself out. 12 matches to play between Lazio and Juventus, and it looks like the title decider will certainly be the game when Lazio visit Turin to take on Juventus at the Allianz Stadium. If they can beat Juventus like they have done on a couple of occasions this season, then I think that should get them over the line in terms of their title ambitions. But at the very least, I think Lazio can look forward to Champions League football this season. They've done very well, very, very well. I mean, they haven't been a regular fixture in the Champions League, appearing perhaps once every decade or so. But this season, they've really put their hands up, spurred by the goals of Ciro Immobile, who's the leading marksman in Serie A, has been for at least a couple of seasons now. His goals have spurred them to the very top at the apex, challenging Juventus. And of course, they've got some really, really good players playing in midfield and even in defence. So they're a team that I suspect will be there right at the end, challenging for honours against Juventus. And maybe if Inter can get their act together, they may have a sniff. But right now, it looks like it's a two-horse race in Italy.
Z. All the rivalry.
Here is Harry Kane for Tottenham. Oh, what a goal! A classic derby goal from Harry Kane. Catch him if you can.
All the stars.
Oh, back here's Liverpool 2 in front. Talk about impudent. Talk about improvisation. Talk about Sadio Mane.
And all the game-changing moments.
And Raheem Sterling rattles at home. Once more, City are in front in a trice.
All the updates from the Premier League on ZiFM Sport.
To the Premier League we go, and Arsenal players will make a return to training at their London Coney training ground next week, despite the UK still being on government-imposed lockdown amid the coronavirus pandemic. They are the first Premier League club to make a tightly controlled return to training since the suspension of football in England due to the coronavirus in March. Sources have said that strict rules have been put in place by the club, Players will travel individually and will already be in their training gear for the session. They will go directly to the outdoor pitches with all buildings at the training ground closed. Players will return home immediately after the session without showering or having lunch on site as they normally do. So the Arsenal players will train in small groups and respect social distancing rules as imposed by the government. Sources have told ESPN players will do individual workouts and train on a rota, so the first team squad do not train all together. I think this is a great step in the right direction to get football resuming again. The Arsenal manager Mikel Arteta tested positive, as we all know, for the coronavirus. The club announced on the 12th of March, which led to the postponement of their game against Brighton and eventually the suspension of all matches being played in England. Now, the UK government actually imposed strict social distancing guidelines following the outbreak, with only essential workers meant to leave their homes in order to travel to work. Following the announcement of the measures last month, a post on the official Arsenal Twitter account read, "Stay at home, save lives." But this is a step in the right direction, and I think other clubs will also start to follow suit in the next week or so. Government instructions say exercise can only be taken alone or with cohabitants, and any outdoor activity should be conducted more than 2 meters away from those who do not live with, according to the guidelines. So I think if all those guidelines are kept in place, and teams and the players especially, we've seen what Tottenham have done. They've gone against a couple of the rules and got themselves into a bit of trouble. But if they can all follow the rules and slowly, gradually get back, hopefully we can get back to seeing some football, although it could, as we've said time and time again, it could be behind closed doors.
Z, the league that makes football oh so beautiful, where artistry and strokes of genius are the order of any day, where the game is played with a smile and the little master creates his magic.
It's Lionel Messi!
All the news from the Spanish La Liga on ZiFM Sport.
The goal the world wanted!
In Spain, their health minister Salvador Illa said on Sunday it would be imprudent to promise the football season would restart before the European summer, as the country took steps to ease one of the world's toughest coronavirus lockdowns. Now, you'll recall that effective today, the government actually allowed that children could go out and play for 1 hour. This is the first time that children have actually gone out of their house. That's how stringent the lockdown was in Spain. So lifting those restrictions is going to take a bit of time, and Salvador Illa saying that he can't make any promises and it will be imprudent for him to promise any sort of dates. He says this: "I can't tell you right now if professional football is going to be able to restart its activities before the summer. It would be imprudent on my part." He said this during a daily briefing on the coronavirus pandemic. Now, saying that he can't promise whether football will be able to restart before the summer doesn't necessarily mean that football isn't going to start. It may restart when we're already in the European summer. That means the months of June and July. But I fully expect that before August, I think we will be seeing football kicking off, certainly in empty stadiums. And La Liga is no exception in Europe. And I think La Liga will kick off at some point in possibly the months of June, mid-June to July, possibly to wrap up the season by early August. And then we'll have the European football, which is the Europa League, and of course the UEFA Champions League kicking off in the month of August. So I fully expect that will happen. But Illa, the health minister in Spain, saying that he can't promise exactly when it's going to kick off. He says the minister sounded a note of caution over La Liga plans to test players for the virus before returning to training and resuming a season which was suspended, of course, on the 12th of March, saying giving a priority to footballers might breach government policy, and that, he said, the diagnostic tests of any kind must be available to the regional governments. So it's the regional governments that take priority, and so the testing of players may not be possible before they return to footballing activity. Lots of boxes to tick, lots of activities to take place before we see a football kicked in Spain, certainly, and we'll keep an eye on it for you, and you'll hear it right here on ZiFM Sport.
Horsepower unmatched. Torque to beat the best. Speed unrivaled. Sleek and easy on the eye. Let's get behind the wheel of football engineered to perfection. The Bundesliga, made in Germany.
Borussia Dortmund chief executive Hans-Joachim Watzke claimed the Bundesliga will go under if the season does not resume in the next few months. The coronavirus pandemic forced the Bundesliga to be postponed last month, but there are hopes the league could be allowed to stage games behind closed doors from the 9th of May, although concerns have been raised that fans may gather outside stadiums. He did point, though, to the fact that they would rely quite heavily on security forces to assist them in making sure that no crowds gathered outside the stadiums as this poses more risk. But it's also to be remembered that the German population is generally disciplined and they would more likely heed the call to remain at home and support their teams remotely. Some teams are actually getting creative. Borussia Mönchengladbach have created options for fans to have their cutouts in the stadium, so there'll be a variety of options worth exploring, and this can deter the fans from attempting to come to the stadium. There have been more than 206,900 COVID-19 casualties worldwide, with 5,900 of those deaths coming from Germany. But Germany is one of those countries that's been credited with handling the coronavirus pandemic especially well. They've carried out an effective testing strategy which allows them to track the virus and control the infections. They've also had plenty of intensive care beds and also a trusted government whose social distancing guidelines have been widely observed by the German population, and this has allowed their death rate to remain relatively low compared to Italy and the UK. So in terms of risk, when the Bundesliga does restart, there'll be a number of conditions in place for the football to continue. So in terms of risk, they will do as much as possible to minimize the risk of teams continuing the infection. The coronavirus has also impacted sport globally, especially financially, and Dortmund CEO Watzke urging a quick restart is not unfounded. So what do these numbers actually look like? So clubs in the Bundesliga expect to lose revenues of about 370 million euros from television money, 240 million euros from sponsorship, 130 million euros from ticket sales and stadium revenue if the remaining match days aren't completed for this season. So these financial losses would be especially harmful to the smaller teams if the season were to end prematurely or not restart soon. The clubs also have things like running costs that need to be met on a weekly and monthly basis, including wages. So getting revenue streams pumping again is going to be key to the profitability and even to the simple existence of these clubs. Dortmund at the moment are second, 4 points behind leaders and defending champions Bayern Munich through 25 games when the Bundesliga was suspended. So it's no surprise that Watzke's pushing for a resumption of the league. Dortmund have yet another opportunity to win the Bundesliga, and winners of the Bundesliga receive somewhere in the region of 100 million euros. So there's definitely a lot of money at stake here that could pull the clubs out of the financial hole they find themselves in.
Yeah, so it's jam-packed on a Monday, but unfortunately that's all the time we have for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow for ZiFM Sport on a Tuesday, Top Hit Tuesday. Until then, stay safe.
And it's Messi! It is the cleanest of clean finishes from the best on the planet.
The biggest sports stories.
Liverpool, the champions of Europe, on top of the world.
The biggest interviews.
That such a great spectacle is ruined by such thuggish behavior.
And all the analysis right here.
He's the one player that has the arrogance to think that he can play in any stadium in the world and any pitch in the world in front of any player in the world and take them on.
Every weekday, it's my sport, it's your sport. It's ZiFM Sport on ZiFM Stereo. My station, your station.